set in a jail where a female prisoner is introduced. This prisoner happens to be a young girl. Within the confines of the cell, this girl engages in storytelling with another inmate. At this point, the narrative transitions into a flashback. Luis, a Cuban man, incredibly wealthy, being a billionaire, but he is also a handsome man. Simultaneously, he expresses his desire to find a life partner, takes the initiative to request the presence of Julia, an American woman from Delaware, as his bride through a mail-order arrangement. However, when Julia arrives at the port, she appears significantly different from the images he had received beforehand. Julia clarifies that she intentionally used someone else's photograph, a woman who may not possess conventional beauty, as she desires more than a partner who merely values physical appearance. Luis, compelled by honesty, reveals his own deception to Julia. He confesses that he deliberately misled her, leading her to believe that he is a modest clerk rather than a prosperous plantation owner. In a moment of vulnerability, Julia acknowledges that they both share a common trait, a lack of trustworthiness due to their respective deceptions. However, amidst this revelation, they find solace in their mutual understanding of each other's flaws. Despite the initial deception and lack of trust, they make a pact to strive for understanding and to build a foundation of trust in their relationship. Recognizing that trust is a vital element in their life together, they reassure one another of their commitment to work towards establishing trust and strengthening their bond. Louis and Julia waste no time and decide to exchange vows in a church shortly after Julia's arrival in Cuba. Their union becomes official within hours of her setting foot in the country. Luis, overwhelmed by intense emotions, falls deeply and desperately in love with Julia. The couple's connection is further intensified as they engage in passionate and intimate moments together, and that night, after they celebrated their special day, he took her to her room and showed her from near distance and looked after her sincerely by saying goodnight. The next morning, Julia goes to his bedroom, wakes him up by bringing coffee to him, and here he gets confused because while they were talking by mail before, she said that as she used to love to drink tea instead of coffee, but Julia manages by assuring him it was just her sister's thought, and she said so as she was talking him by using her sister's identity. Both chuckle together. Then after a while, she starts singing and playing piano. After some time, Louis shows her his investments and his companions, and they kiss there. The narration continues about their intimacy, and back to home, both of them get intimate and have sex warmly several times. The following day, Louis finds himself in his office, engaged in a conversation with Alan. Overwhelmed with happiness, he confides in Alan, expressing that he has never felt such joy before. Louis openly admits his love for Julia and expresses contentment with his decision to marry her. Continuing their journey together, Louis decides to treat Julia to a day at the theater to watch a play. Both of them thoroughly enjoy the performance, completely engrossed in the unfolding story. However, during the course of the play, Louis notices that Julia's attention is fixated on one particular actor, captivated by their performance. Observing this, Alan's wife becomes suspicious, closely monitoring Julia's actions. As the play concludes, Julia remains lost in thought, smiling and seemingly engrossed in conversation. Excusing herself to use the restroom, she steps away momentarily. Curiosity getting the better of him, Louis follows Julia, searching for her. To his surprise, instead of finding her in the restroom, he discovers her engaged in conversation with the actor from the play who had captured her attention. Confused and concerned, Louis questions Julia about her presence backstage and her conversation with the man. Julia, startled by her husband's unexpected appearance, recognizes him and becomes puzzled as to why he is addressing her. Sensing that she was about to be caught, she quickly asks the actor to return to her seat. The next day, while Louis is at work, Julia's sister, Emily, grows increasingly worried about Julia's well-being. Fearing something may have happened, Emily writes an emotional letter expressing her concerns and seeking reassurance about Julia's safety. Aware of the potential consequences if Julia continues to ignore Emily's letters, Louis insists that Julia must respond. He fears that Emily, assuming something terrible has happened to her sister, might escalate the situation by involving the authorities. Reluctantly, Julia succumbs to Louis' insistence and eventually writes a letter to her sister. Although she delays doing so for as long as possible, realizing the gravity of the situation, she finally puts pen to paper and communicates with Emily, providing some semblance of reassurance. The following night, Julia experiences distressing nightmares, causing her to cry out in fear. Louis, Luis, awakened by her cries, immediately rushes to her side to offer comfort and support. He embraces her tightly, showering her with affectionate kisses, and gently encourages her to lie back down. During this intimate moment, Luis notices the scars on Julia's back. The next morning, as they awaken, Julia brings a letter to Luis. Luis demonstrates his deep trust and dedication to Julia by taking a significant stride in their relationship. He decides to include her in both his business and personal bank accounts, symbolizing a strong bond and solidifying their commitment to each other. This act grants Julia the freedom and autonomy to manage and utilize the funds as she sees fit. Afterwards, Luis proceeds to his exercise location, indulging in a boxing match to release some energy. Following his workout, he heads back to his office, where he engages in a conversation with Alan. During their discussion, Luis expresses curiosity about Julia's recent unsettling dream, showing a genuine interest in understanding her emotional state. However, the tranquility of their arrangement is abruptly interrupted when a detective named Walter Downs arrives in Cuba from Wilmington. Walter intercepts Luis along his way and discloses that he has been hired by Julia's sister, Emily, with the specific objective of locating Julia. In response, Luis informs Walter that he and Julia are now married and living together, emphasizing their commitment to each other. Despite this revelation, Walter expresses his intention to meet with Julia on the upcoming Sunday, presumably to verify her well-being. Feeling the weight of this unexpected development, Luis continues his search for Julia. Eventually, he finds her amidst the preparations for dressing, surrounded by servants. Overjoyed by their reunion, Julia kisses him affectionately and eagerly shows him the array of dresses being prepared. Seizing the moment, they dismiss all the servants, desiring privacy and intimacy. They are about to embark on a shared bath, their romantic encounters intensifying with passionate kisses. Louis and Julia enjoy a bath together, sharing an intimate moment in the tub. During this time, Luis promptly informs Julia about the detective's visit and the purpose behind it. As Julia receives this news, her emotions become visibly disturbed and she becomes upset. However, the specific reasons behind her distress remain undisclosed. Unexpectedly, while they are still in the aftermath of their bath, one of the housemaids enters the room and discovers a lifeless bird. Overwhelmed with sadness, she shows the bird to Luis, who was heartbroken by the sight. Realizing that Julia might be deeply affected by seeing the dead bird, he urgently reminds the housemaid to remove it from sight before Julia has a chance to notice. They swiftly attend to the situation and return to the bedroom. Then after Emily travels to Cuba to meet Luis and confronts him with the letter Julia had written. She expresses her suspicion that the woman who claimed to be Julia is an impostor and suggests that her sister might have met a tragic fate. Shocked by this revelation, Luis realizes that Julia has not only deceived him emotionally, but has also taken a significant portion of his fortune. Determined to find her, Luis joins forces with Walter, the detective hired by Emily. During their search, Luis manages to locate Julia, only to discover that she and Walter have been working together all along. Despite the betrayal, Luis holds on to the belief that Julia still harbors genuine feelings for him. In an attempt to protect his relationship with Julia, he deceives Walter by providing false information. However, when confronted about his deceit, a heated altercation erupts, resulting in a violent fight between Luis and Walter. The situation escalates, leading Luis to shoot Walter in self-defense or in the heat of the moment. Julia devises a plan and instructs Luis to purchase tickets for their journey back home. However, it becomes evident that this was a ruse, as Walter, who was assumed to be dead, is actually still alive. Although Julia appears to have genuine affection for Luis, she also harbors a deep fear of Walter. In an attempt to escape the clutches of Walter, Julia and Luis decide to flee and live in secrecy, constantly aware of Walter's relentless pursuit. To their astonishment, it is revealed that Walter is not actually Walter, but rather Julia's former lover and partner, Billy. Billy has been assuming the identity of Walter all along. The complicated dynamic between Julia, Billy, and Luis intensifies as they navigate their dangerous predicament. During their encounters, Billy inflicts a cut on Julia's back, reminiscent of their previous sexual encounters. Luis makes a drastic decision to abandon his bright prospects and chooses to be with Julia, also known as Bonnie. One fateful evening, driven by suspicion, Luis secretly trails Julia Bonnie and makes a shocking revelation. Walter Billy, whom they believe to be dead, is actually alive, and they are still collaborating. To Luis's horror, it becomes apparent that Julia Boni intends to poison her husband that very night. Filled with a mix of anguish and determination, Luis returns home and patiently awaits Julia Boni's arrival. As she enters the room, he confronts her about the sinister plan, exposing his knowledge of the scheme. Despite the circumstances, Luis musters the strength to express his enduring love for her. In a heart-wrenching act of sacrifice, he willingly consumes the poisoned drink. As Julia and the critically injured Luis attempt to escape, they find themselves being pursued closely by Walter. Their frantic flight leads them to a train station where a climactic encounter takes place. Walter, consumed by anger and a sense of betrayal, confronts Julia for her disloyalty. In a tense and life-threatening moment, Walter brandishes a knife, pressing it against Julia's throat, exerting control over her. However, Luis, despite his weakened state, summons the last ounce of his strength and courageously takes action. He aims his weapon at Walter, managing to shoot and wound him, thereby disrupting Walter's hold over Julia. Seizing the opportunity, Julia, empowered by the turn of events, takes matters into her own hands. With determination and resolve, she delivers the final blow to Walter, ensuring their escape from his menacing grip. Returning to the setting where the story began, Julia reaches the conclusion of her narrative and makes a request to the priest. She implores him to join her in prayer, seeking solace and spiritual support in her final moments. As the night passes and the sun rises, the guards arrive at Julia's prison cell the following morning, prepared to escort her to her impending execution. However, to their surprise, they discover the priest kneeling before them, dressed in Julia's attire. In the Moroccan setting, Julia finds herself observing a card game in progress. With curiosity and intrigue, she moves around the table, where the gamblers, including Luis, are engaged in their play. Julia takes a moment to express her gratitude to them for granting her the opportunity to witness their game. As the game unfolds, Julia discreetly communicates with Luis, subtly signaling him about the cards held by the other players. Sensing an opportunity, Luis seizes the moment and begins narrating the tale of their journey that led them to this particular moment in Morocco. With his words, he captivates the attention of the gamblers, drawing them into the story that unfolds before their eyes. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our recap. Watch our next videos on the screen, and don't forget for more amazing recaps. See you on the next one.